Larry Fink, Soros, State Street, Vanguard, BlackRock. How much have you looked at what they're doing and what their ties are? 88% of them. The largest shareholder of those companies is either State Street, BlackRock, or Vanguard. I'm like, let me see if these guys, this ESG, Larry Fink, Vanguard, State Street, if they have any influence on military contract, defense contract. If you Google the largest shareholder for Raytheon, 3 out of the 4 top shareholders of Raytheon, BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. And then you work backwards and you say, okay, how much money is that in what these guys are doing? You'll find the amount of money we spent in our military, $744 billion on how much we're making from defense, but you'll see some numbers saying last year it's 13% of our GDP, which is around $850 billion. That's more than Russia spent on their military last year. Let's go look at this. And you're like, wait a minute. $10 trillion. How big is $10 trillion? Only 2 countries have a bigger GDP than what BlackRock has, assets under management, U.S. and China. So then they went and they started getting all these other guys to sign on and say, hey, we want you to participate with the same thing as well with ESG. And they ended up having, I think they had 31 signers. I think end of 2022, they got 60-something signers for a total of $70 trillion of assets under management that they're controlling. Rebuilding of Ukraine, $400 billion contract. BlackRock and Chase is helping rebuild Ukraine. They have that much control to get everybody to do what they want them to do. You got the DEI, the HRC, the human rights, and all this stuff. We have 3 million teachers are part of that union. How do you feel about the kind of power they have right now to fight against them? Because this isn't like a billionaire can come out and say, I'm going to go up against these guys. They can replace leaders if they don't like. Are you convinced these guys are really running the world, or what do you think about what some of these bigger companies are doing?
Well, they certainly have massive amounts of influence.
The question is, how do you fight it? It's going to take 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 years. There is an actual strategy on how to fight that. You take a year, jiu-jitsu 2 years, this, that, boom. One fight. If I'm a president, whether it's a Trump or whoever else goes out there and does it, our monopoly law in America is 50%. They say 50%. Like if you tie and said, at what point is it 50%? The FTC called and said, hey, we want to have a call with you because they're thinking about buying this other technology company and we're worried it's going to be a monopoly. Do you know how many people in America have an iPhone versus Droid? But who's knocking on the door of Apple? Tim Cook saying, hey, Tim. These guys that were trying to get the defense contractors to be better at the pricing, what they were charging, because they were overcharging DOD, and DOD people don't know what the hell is going on. They took 51 defense companies and they brought it down to only 5. Earlier, I was asking you a question, why do you think vaccine? And you're like, Pat, if you and I are running a hospital, we need people on the beds to make money. This guy's an anti-establishment president. Good. You have to let them be independent again. The guy running BlackRock is really the president of the United States. And he's like, well, I kind of feel bad. I'm ashamed that all the weaponization, the word, ESG is being used and all this other stuff. And Elon tweeted about the ESG. I don't know if you remember when Elon tweeted about ESG, saying the S in ESG is satanic. But I'm not interested in having an emperor. And after a couple of years, they got $5 billion under management. And then they have a difference because, he wants to give equity. And Jamie's, Schwartzman's like, no, and then they separate. But influence of politics, because behind closed doors, they're going to be like, look, guys, let's relax. That guy's only going to be there for 4 to 8 years. A Tesla on ESG score is nothing, but a Philip Morris gets an A rating. How the hell the company that's Philip Morris has a better environmental, social governance score, DEI, not DEI, but the CI, the score they give it over Tesla?
Why do you think they're establishing these sort of parameters?
So Schultz said something very interesting. So, you know how sometimes Michael Jackson, you see the interview with him with kids. You got a 7, 8-year-old, 10-year-old kid sleeping in your bed and, all this stuff. And it's a little bit fishy what you're talking about here. Well, if you're in Hollywood and you've slept with as many people as these people sleep, and then eventually you have to have other options because what else do you do? Jamie Dimon's got a $900 million art collection, according to an article. They're presidents and prime ministers, and you tell yourself. So the motive becomes control more than money. After you have all the money in the world, what's next? It's got to be control or a true vision. That story is a completely different story. Have you ever seen this interview or what he says? I think it's, if you type in LA Times Soros God, if you type in LA Times Soros God, when you hear what he says, it's like the second to the last paragraph all the way to the bottom. The guy asks a question, about who he views himself as. I want to quote it properly, exactly what he says. And to quote, it seems that Soros believes he was anointed by God. If truth be known, I carried some rather potent messianic fantasies with me from childhood, which I felt I had to control, otherwise they might get me in trouble. And then on the next line, when asked by Britain's independent newspaper to elaborate on the passage, Soros says, it is sort of a disease when you consider yourself some kind of a god, the creator of everything, but I feel comfortable about it now.